everybody, today we are debating whether or not there is evidence for near-death experiences, and we are starting right now. Ladies and gentlemen, thrilled to have you here for this epic debate in which we have none other than TJump, Skeptiko, and as a quick last-minute pitch hitter, Praise, as these guys have a triple threat match. Basically, you might be thinking like, oh, wait a minute, is Praise, are he and Skeptiko going to team up against Tom? Not exactly. Alex, or Skeptiko, as he goes by, is ready to go after both of these guys. I can tell you he's confident, and I appreciate that he is, you might say, an aggressive debater in a good way. With that, want to also say, though, it's his first time here, and if it's your first time here, consider hitting that subscribe button, as we've got a lot more debates coming up that we're very excited about. And want to let you know, if you have any questions, fire those into the live chat. I will certainly pick out your questions, put them in a list, and then we'll ask them at the end of the debate. At least as many as we can fit in with the time that we have. And last, want to let you know that our guests, who we are very thankful to have here, have their links in the description. So if you want to check out more of their content, highly encourage you to check out those links. Just, right down there. See that? So with that, very excited for this just completely open discussion type of deal. And as I mentioned, this is going to be very interesting because Praise doesn't exactly know. I told him that he and Skeptiko don't actually really agree on this, but we'll just kind of let that play out and be a surprise for Praise. So with that, we are very excited with that. So, gentlemen, I suppose, Skeptiko, since you would take a yes, you would say that there is evidence for the afterlife, scientific evidence. We'll let you kind of get the ball rolling in this discussion, and thanks again for being here.
You're welcome, James. Thanks for the invite. As far as consciousness surviving death, I think the first question would be understanding the nature of consciousness, which seems to be where these debates always kind of go straight. Fortunately, when TJump and I did this last time, I do think we stayed pretty much on target about that question, which I think is the fundamental question, which is, what is the nature of consciousness? Then the secondary question is, what is the evidence that consciousness may, in some way we don't understand, survive bodily death as we understand it, medical death? And then, I'd love to, I don't know you, Praise, and I don't know anything about your position. But then the next question would be, I guess, that we're throwing on the table is that suggestive or supportive of Christian dogma, Christian beliefs? And so that'd be kind of the third
Right.
level of question.
And I would respond, absolutely. And I think we have an abundance of accounts that show, or at least alludes to the Christian God of these accounts. Absolutely.
Okay, well, that's just sounds good. It's just not supported by the evidence. What I was going to share, I actually had an interview a while back with a guy, Ian McCormick, who took the same line. Actually, a pretty interesting guy. A Glimpse of Eternity is his book. Story you've heard a million times. Guy has a near-death experience, a really dramatic near-death experience. He was actually swimming and was, I guess I want to be, when you get stung by a jellyfish, it's a sting, right? But he had 7 stings from this really poisonous box jellyfish, and he died. And he was in this island out in the Indian Ocean, and they didn't have a very advanced medical facility. And they actually pulled this guy into the morgue, and he was in the morgue for several hours. He recovered only through, he doesn't know what, but during the process of his near-death experience, he did leave his body. He did have an otherworldly encounter, and it was a very Christian encounter. So he has become, and he wasn't a Christian before, and that was a conversion experience for him. So now he goes all around the country and he preaches the word of near-death experience, being supportive of this. Now, if I can, I'd play the clip from our interview, because of course I guess I can't really say of course, but his conclusion flies in the face of virtually every near-death experience researcher who's studied this extensively. Pin von Lommel, Dr. Jeffrey Long, every one of them have come to a absolutely different conclusion after looking at the body of the data and say that, to the contrary, near-death experiences, once we get past the understanding that they are highly suggestive, that consciousness is in some way suggestive of survival to death, they are not supportive of Christian dogma. They're not supportive of any faith, any particular faith, and the experiences that people have once we go there doesn't really support that belief at all. So it just isn't supported by the data. Praise.
Oh, okay, yeah. I mean, I could just go to the NDEs on YouTube, and I can show, I mean, literal like 200 to 500 of them, showing that they verify or at least allude to the Christian God. And here's a doctor, you know, I don't know if you ever heard of this guy. He's done NDEs for over 40 years, Bruce Grayson.
Sure, he's at University of Virginia.
Yep.
He's never said that there's any kind of that the Christian faith, the Christian dogma, is supported by the accounts of near-death experience. The person who's done the most extensive cataloging survey work that answers these kind of questions is a radiation oncologist out of Louisiana named Dr. Jeffrey Long. He has the largest database of near-death experiences. He's a medical researcher in addition to being a radiation oncologist. He's not a Christian. He's just a guy who's looking at the data, and he'll tell you all day long the data does not support any particular religious belief.
Yeah, well, I mean, Dr. Grayson's actually talked about this. I've heard him several times, and he has brought up that most of these counts, I'm saying the majority, so that is a majority claim, that most of these people that go through near-death experiences experience a giant or a great light of loving, a spirit of light, or something about, you know, a giant light, like God's light, and he's a spirit. So I think that is congruent with Christianity. What other faith would have a, you know, John 4:24 says God is a spirit and a light? What other faith, you know, proclaims that? I don't see anything that matches that as far as other religions.
We're gonna give Skeptiko a chance to respond, and then once he does, we're gonna kick it over to let Tom jump out of his cage. So go ahead, Alex.
Okay. Well, I mean, when you get into kind of those kind of debates about it's just not a good debate in terms of what other religion, you know, other than my religion says that way. Well, I don't know that that's really the case. I mean, first of all, this whole experience with survival of death is well recorded in a lot of different religions, right? Have you heard the Tibetan Book of the Dead? I mean, they have an extensive body of knowledge for over 1,000 years of what it's like to die, and they, in a non-scientific way, but in an important way, if you look at what they've cataloged, they report something similar to the near-death experience, and they're obviously not Christians. But the other way you'd look at this is cross-cultural. And I just interviewed a guy named Dr. Gregory Shushan who did exactly that. He took and again, he's not a Christian. He's not even, he's more of a humanist, atheist kind of leaning guy. He has to be because he works in academia, and that's a requirement of the job. But he looked at a cross-cultural analysis of near-death experience, and particularly in Native and Aboriginal tribes, so both all over the world. And he tried to find, so again, you'd be way outside of any kind of Christian belief system when you're looking at native cultures before colonization and all that kind of stuff. So the data just doesn't support what you're saying.
Promise will come.
No, sure.
Forgive me, praise. Just to get Tom jump in. I promise we'll come back to that for your praise. But Tom jump, I don't know. I mean, do you buy it? You might not be. I know, obviously, you wouldn't think that they're evidence for Christianity. But do you buy Alex's claim that there are these near-death experiences in which people have some sort of consciousness of some variety after they die?
Well, near-death experiences definitely happen. They're definitely a real thing, but they don't indicate that the mind is anything more than physical. Like most of the evidence for NDEs involves EEGs and other ways that measure brain activity, but they require like 50,000 neurons to be active in order to measure the electrical activity. And we know that electrical activity and brain activity can happen less than 50,000 neurons. You can just take one neuron and the brain is still working. So even if you're clinically dead, it takes hours for your brain cells to actually decay beyond no return. And so they can still be signals and transmitting data well past several hours of being clinically EEG flatlined. So there's no problem there. And normally when brain functions, when you like fall asleep or lose consciousness, the areas of the brain start to shut down in a synchronized order bit by bit. But when you suddenly lose consciousness, like when you have cardiac arrest or go through a sudden traumatic experience that causes sudden arrhythmia, none of those things happen. So your brain just essentially shuts down the core consciousness EEG stuff, but most of the other parts are still functioning just as they would. And so the fact that you would have a conscious memory of what was occurring based off of your sense experience makes perfect sense if your brain suddenly shuts down without shutting down all of the things in the sequential order to stop it from being saved as a kind of conscious memory. It makes perfect sense. And we know that that happens in the brain. We know that activity continues well after what is clinically determined as death. We have lots of evidence of that. So the fact that we have experiences after the large brain activity stops is not surprising at all. And so because the brain isn't dead, it's only near dead. There's still brain activity going on. There's still electrical and all kinds of activity going on in the brain that happens all the time. And even non-electrical activity, just biochemical changes in the neurons. And all of those can result in new memories. And because of the brain's sudden loss of consciousness, the fact that you remember it as a conscious memory and it's recording sense data makes perfect sense. Like there's not really a problem here for any kind of naturalistic worldview. And to quote Dr. Julian Mussolino, a cognitive scientist, most, in fact, the overwhelming majority of people in my line of work are what's called materialists or physicalists. There's a number of lines of reason that cover all the same conclusions. That's what philosophers of science call consilience of the evidence. That's what supports the strong conclusions like evolution and climate change. And so as in the case of evolution and the fossil record and molecular biology, comparative analogy, all these things point to the same direction, likewise for the soul. So essentially all of the stuff that we see in near-death experiences is just stuff we can't explain. I grant that. And we don't have a current explanation given our current knowledge, but that doesn't therefore indicate that it's non-physical in any sense. It's just something we don't know how to explain yet.
I want to give Alex a chance to respond, but before Skeptiko responds, I just want to ask, Tom, I think that, is there a way you might be able to turn your gain up just a little bit? It's a little bit hard to hear you. And Skeptiko, if you want a chance to reply, the floor is yours. Pardon my interruption.
No problem. We can move on. I mean, I got like 2 hours with Tom on this. If he was here, you know, I guess I can play this clip for him because I promised I'd dig this up. He hasn't done any of the work that he said he was going to do. But here's from a real researcher. This is one of the top EEG experts in the world. Here, I'll play this for you. And not a near-death experience guy.
One sec, I just have to shrink.
On this episode of Skeptiko, EEG expert Dr. John Greenfield.
So when the brain is not getting much blood, it pretty much shuts down. In that time when it's not getting very much, there's really very little activity going on, and it'd be very unlikely that somebody could have a complex sort of dreamlike state as described for most near-death experiences, at least during that time.
And near-death experience researcher Dr. Penny Sartori.
What I did was the people who had a near-death experience and the out-of-body experience, what they recorded was really quite accurate. And I decided then to ask the control group, the people who'd actually had a cardiac arrest but had no recollection of anything at all, I asked them if they would reenact their resuscitation scenario and tell me what they thought that we had done to resuscitate them. And what I found was that many of the patients couldn't even guess as to what we'd done. They had no idea at all. And then some of them did make guesses, but these were based on TV hospital dramas that they'd seen. And I found that what they reported was widely inaccurate.
Stay with us for Skeptiko.
So can I respond to this real quick, too? Because I actually have a peer-reviewed citation. It's going to be real quick. Is that okay, Tom or James? Sweet, man. Can you guys see that?
Let's see. Let me just open it up. And yes, I've got it showing now for the audience.
Awesome. So this guy's Bruce Grayson. He's worked with NDEs for over 35 to 40 years with other panels of scientists. And he put a peer review out, this paper here, you can check it out. But he goes through, he eliminates naturalistic explanations, exactly what Tom was explaining. He goes through toxic and metabolic hallucinations, and he, through their extensive research, he goes through and knocks all those out. Neurochemistry, he knocks that out. Neuroanatomy, he knocks that out. And then he goes positive effects, negative effects, he goes all the way through the paper. But at the very bottom, this is what I wanted to show Tom. And this is why naturalistic explanations cannot account for NDEs. Some of the phenomenological features of NDEs are difficult to explain in terms of our current understanding of psych, blah, blah, blah. But see, some of these accounts, they actually can see young ones that they never even knew in the past. So how would they know about young ones and their relatives in the past when they never even met them? So there's knowledge that's unattainable through naturalistic explanation. So that's why I wanted to show Tom here that we have peer-reviewed citations showing that NDEs cannot be accounted naturalistically. So I recommend you check that out. And for everyone in the chat as well, because they were doubting me and when I was talking to chat. So there it is. Enjoy.
Thank you, Phrase. Either one of you, if you'd like to respond.
Yeah, let me respond to both of them. So Alex's quote, none of that was inconsistent with what I said. So the fact that NDEs happen, they don't happen when you're not conscious. They happen when you're, so it's just brain changes that you're not conscious of that you recall after you become conscious. So obviously there's no conscious activity going on during when you're unconscious. So the NDE doesn't actually occur until the activity reignites in the brain later. So everything he said is consistent with the majority consensus view, which is just physical material processes. There's no problem with that for the scientific consensus at all. Secondly, for praise, as it said in the quote that he actually listed, it's inexplicable by known processes, but there's still an infinite amount of unknown processes, which is, again, not a problem because that's kind of the consensus. The fact that we can't explain it with known processes isn't evidence of supernatural at all, even if there's things that, like, even if you could tell something on the other side of the planet that you had no idea about, that still wouldn't be evidence of the supernatural. It's just a thing we can't explain.
Nature of the gaps.
Exactly.
Nature of the gaps isn't a thing. That's just induction. So white goose. Next one is a white
It's the same thing as God of the gaps. Are you serious?
Exactly.
No.
It's a joke.
So that part's important. If you don't understand this, you just don't understand basic logic.
Right.
There's in the goalposts.
Let me finish my point here. So there's a difference between nature of the gaps is just induction, and God of the gaps is bullcrap. So if you see,
okay, yeah, I see how that works.
Hold on. Let's just let him finish, praise.
That's correct. So if you see white goose, and you infer the next one's going to be white, that's called induction. If you see white goose, and say, oh no, there's a black one, I'm going to infer the next one's a black one, that's bullcrap. So in naturalism, since we've seen lots of natural stuff working consistently and making predictions forever, we can predict that the next unknown is going to be solved naturally with induction. That's reasonable. And predicting it's going to be solved with supernatural is bullcrap, just basic logic.
Sounds like incredulity. That's an argument from incredulity. You have to show something that validates your naturalistic presuppositions.
No, an argument from incredulity is the fact that I can't imagine something, therefore it's not true. I never said that.
That's what you're saying, though.
Let's
No,
give
I
him,
never
It's
said that.
bullcrap
Let's give him a
because we
chance.
just can't imagine something, you know.
No, that's not what I said at all. So I have no idea what you're saying. But we should let Alex go. He hasn't talked in a while.
That's okay. Here, I'll toss another clip on the table for you guys.
So, Dr. Long, let me probe a little bit further about the types of near-death experience research that's out there. Because over the years, I've interviewed a lot of near-death experience researchers. And for example, just the other day, I interviewed this guy, nice enough guy, University of California. He's doing his postdoctorate fellowship. He's part of a team. They receive $4 million from Foundation to study near-death experiences. So I speak to him about his research. Turns out he didn't really do any original research. He didn't go into a hospital, into a cardiac arrest ward and talk to patients there. He didn't as you did, develop a 150 medical survey and give it to hundreds of near-death experience researchers. Yet he published his results. We talked about his book. He concluded that near-death experiences aren't real in the way that we're talking about. They don't suggest that consciousness seems to survive bodily death. So I guess the question is, for the average person who's trying to sort through this idea of near-death experience science, research, how do they sort through it? How do they know what research really holds up out there?
The key thing is to know a few of the consistently seen elements of near-death experience that are the strongest evidence for their reality. For example, when you're under general anesthesia, it should be impossible to have a lucid, organized remembrance at that time. In fact, under anesthesia, you're typically so far under. With general anesthesia, they often have to breathe for you. I mean, you're literally brain shut down to the level of the brainstem. And at that point in time, some people have a cardiac arrest. Their heart stops. And of course, that's very well documented. They monitor people very carefully that are having general anesthesia. So I have dozens and dozens of near-death experiences that occurred under general anesthesia. And at this time, it should be, if you will, doubly impossible to have a conscious remembrance. And yet they do have near-death experiences at this time. And they're typical near-death experiences. They have the same elements and appear to have them in the same order as near-death experiences occurring under all other circumstances. And in fact, a critical survey question I asked was what their level of consciousness and alertness during the experience was. Well, even under general anesthetics, under those powerful chemicals to produce sedation, if they had a near-death experience under general anesthesia, their level of consciousness and alertness was identical to near-death experiences occurring under all other circumstances. There's absolutely no way the skeptics can explain that away. It's impossible. That in and of itself is some of the strongest single line of evidence that near-death experiences have to be independent of brain functioning. There's simply no way you can be under general anesthesia and have a highly lucid, organized experience like that, and especially one that's consistently seen throughout near-death experience research. So that's
So again, that's Dr. Jeffrey Long, from radiation oncologist from Louisiana. And again, you know, so I interview a lot of people, and they respond directly to that research. They don't, which is the only way to really do it. You can't just respond in general and say, I just don't believe it. You know, it's like, here's a guy who's doing the work. You gotta deal with the evidence. And every other near-death experience researcher of any reputation, and I've interviewed so many of them, they all come to the same conclusion.
A question for Tom, though.
One sec, let me respond to Alex. So again, all of that's consistent with everything I said and the consensus.
No, it's completely not. He just said the opposite of what you said.
I just want to give Tom a chance.
He said the exact same thing. He said, we don't know how to explain it with currently known processes. Like, yeah, I accept that. I said that in my introduction. But
do you want me to play the end when he says there's no way skeptics can respond to this? There's no way skeptics can say that this is a normal, that this, not normal, he doesn't say that this is a brain created process. This is an epiphenomenon of the brain. Do you want me to play that again? I'll play it again, Tom.
You can. He's full of crap because, again, the majority of everyone.
Well, is he full of crap, which is something different from what you said? Is he full of crap, or is he saying the same thing that you are?
I want to give Tom a chance to respond.
When he says that it can't be explained by current natural processes, that's the consensus. Everyone agrees with that. When he says that it can't ever be explained by any natural process, he's full of crap. Like, that's specifically just an argument from ignorance. We know that for a fact. That can't ever apply. So anything that can be explained by the supernatural can necessarily be explained by the unknown natural. It's just a logical necessity. So if he ever says it can't ever be explained by natural processes, he's full of crap.
So can I ask Tom a question?
Go for it.
Sweet. Okay, so there's several blind people that were born blind from their birth, and they've had near-death experiences, and they can actually explain colors. They can describe colors, but also they describe things outside their own hospital bed, like train stations, and they can explain objects, colors, and such. So, do you tell me how you can explain that naturalistically?
Well, I could tell them something, and then they could then repeat the words back to me. That's an easy.
No, that's not my question. If they can explain outside of their own hospital bed, the outside environment and other things going on, like train stations, but they were born blind. Now tell me how that's possible.
Praise, can you see my room right now? Can you see the behind my chair at all?
No, but I can. I have eyes though. I have vision though.
There's 2 guitars in the corner that you can't see. Now, can you then repeat those words? Say there are 2 guitars in my room.
There's 2 guitars in it. So what?
Oh my God! You've never seen my room, and yet you know there's 2 guitars in it. It's amazing. Ah, supernatural.
No, I'm saying these blind people they described them in detail. Like train stations, they describe the colors of snow. They describe that.
So my natural explanation for that is that people can tell them stuff, and then they can remember that
stuff
and then say it.
That is such horse manure, dude. That is such horse manure. You know it.
Yes,
he doesn't know it. He does not know it. I guarantee he doesn't know it.
Let's give Tom a chance to respond.
Yeah, I don't see that's pretty easy to explain. Like, there's nothing challenging about that at all. Like,
yeah.
Cynicism.
Okay, I'll throw something else on the table if it's okay, and then I gotta go here pretty soon. Here we go.
These people are just generally regarded as scientists, as the mainstream scientists. And we're talking about Richard Dawkins, Lawrence Krauss, Neil deGrasse Tyson. I mean, Neil deGrasse Tyson, whether we like it or not, is the face of science for many, many, many Americans. So let's see what mainstream science has to say about consciousness. Here we go. I'm going to play this clip. You can see it there. I'm going to play it.
But you can say something about the question which you really would wish to know the answer to. And I mean, for me, it would be what's consciousness? Because that's totally baffling.
Richard, you know what I think? I agree. Not that you asked, but what I think on this is consciousness has kind of baffled us for a while, okay? And evidence that we haven't a clue about what consciousness is drawn from the fact of how many books are published on the topic, right? We're not really continuing to publish books, not really, on like Newtonian physics. It's done, all right? So the fact that people keep publishing books on consciousness is the evidence we don't know anything about it, because if we knew all about it, you wouldn't have to keep publishing. So what I wonder, Richard, is whether there really is no such thing as consciousness at all, and that there's some other understanding of the functioning of the human brain that renders that question obsolete.
To that, I gotta say, like, oh, wow.
Perfect.
Okay.
You're laughing. I'm laughing like you're like rolling the aisles laughing. What is so funny about that? Of course, that last voice was Bill Nye, the science guy, who was up there with him too. What's so
he
funny?
Was astonished. Bill was astonished.
It doesn't take much.
I mean, the idea that maybe consciousness is not there is probably the weirdest, stupidest idea ever conceived by human thought. I mean, where does thought take place? It takes place in consciousness. So here we have consciousness speculating about the possibility that consciousness does not exist and it may not be there. I mean, the very thought is an in-your-face contradiction. And the fact that something like this is not only seriously entertained, but even verbalized by a person with the public exposure of the gentleman we just saw is a worrying sign of cultural sickness. A very serious one.
These people are just generally regarded as...
So that, just in case people want to know, that is Dr. Bernardo Kastrup.
Kastrup, yeah, idealist.
Yeah. Right, and he's also a PhD in computer science too, and is the high-ranking corporate position in one of the largest chip fabrication design companies in the world. So the guy really knows his stuff, and he's a really smart guy, written a number of books on the topic. And so this is kind of the stuff that I generally like to, is more kind of the Skeptiko kind of stuff, you know, the nature of consciousness, what's really behind, how could such a ridiculous idea as this consciousness is an illusion thing, how could that continue to propagate, and those kind of stuff. This other stuff that we're talking about here is just, man, I got 100 interviews on this from 10 years ago. It's just not that, doesn't really float my battleship.
Tom, your thoughts? Are you convinced yet?
No, I mean, I'm not sure to even understand the argument there. So the whole point of the consciousness is an illusion hypothesis is that consciousness is an emergent property of epiphenomenon in the brain, and so it's all secondary process determined by other things in the brain, and so it doesn't actually reflectively do anything, which is a serious interpretation. But it's not just consciousness doesn't exist as a thing, it's just an emergent thing, not a causal thing.
Well, that's I won't bother wasting our time here, but no, you've kind of conflated two ideas. There's one, strict materialism, Daniel Dennett, consciousness is an illusion. Daniel Dennett never had emergence on his mind.
He explicitly said that. That's just a quote from him. That's literally a quote. I can just get you the quote from Dan Dennett where he said, yes, consciousness is emergent.
Well, he's adopted, he's picked up on that now, but 20 years ago, 10 years ago, when he said consciousness is an illusion, everyone's been trying to kick it around. And besides, the idea that it's an emergent, you know, these guys are really stretching the idea of emergence. But normally, in every other instance in biology that when we talk about emergence, we understand what the constituent elements are that are emerging. So if you say a whirlpool is an emergent property of water, then we can model that because we know there's wind, there's air, there's water, and it moves this way. You can't just sprinkle it like magic dust over saying, here's something, we can't tell you when it begins, when it ends, what's necessary and sufficient to cause it, yet we can apply this idea called emergent property, and we can apply it to that. No, it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, I mean, not to mention Chalmers' zombie and also the hard problem of consciousness. Sorry, Tom. I mean, there's things out there you need to recognize, arguments against your position. It's not fundamental at all, and it's not the mainstream position. It's absolutely ridiculous. And consciousness cannot be described in neural correlates anyway. You cannot get qualia from physical space. So that's ridiculous. Consciousness is therefore fundamental and immaterial, not emergent. So,
okay, so to respond to Alex, Dan Dennett's book in 1991, he explicitly says that consciousness arises from interactions of physical and cognitive processes in the brain. It's literally an emergent process that he was describing there. Secondly, you're right that we can't just slap the label of emergent process on anything. That would not be correct.
But your quote, he didn't use emergence.
The word emergent means arises from interactions of physical and cognitive processes. That's literally what emergent means.
No, this emergent thing, you can use it more like in the terms of like a sand dune or a whirlpool or something like that. What he's saying is it's just an epiphenomenon of the brain, but all this stuff is really kind of not super important or interesting to most people, just like when you talk about idealism versus materialism and all the rest of that stuff. The real question, what I'd get back to is, I mean, this is pointless because you can't even listen to what Jeff Long says, and then you can't even argue when he says skeptics wouldn't agree with this, and then it's just, I guess I'm kind of done with it, man.
Well, I read the quotes from the skeptics who explicitly say the majority of people in this field say that's wrong. So I mean, I don't know. The consensus wins on that one.
No,
not the consensus.
Yeah, so most people in the field, Jeffrey Long here, okay, like I'm gonna go with the consensus on this one.
Jeffrey, you're talking about two different fields, right? Jeff Long is someone who studied near-death experience science. Bruce Grayson is somebody who studied near-death experience science. So
exactly.
Is Pim von Lommel. So you're kind of, it's like I brought up the EEG expert because I brought him up last time. He's independent. He doesn't have a dog in the fight, but he said the same thing. He said we have no neurological model that would explain how like Jeff Long says, if somebody's under general anesthesia, we have no neurological model how they could be having these intense experiences. And your response to that is, well, maybe we will someday. Maybe we'll find it someday. And like Praise points out, that's just a gap argument.
It's like the magical over the rainbow. You're going to find the gold over the rainbow. That's what you're saying there, Tom. And remember, I showed a peer review. This is peer-reviewed citation. I showed you, and it eliminates all your excuses to account for near-death experiences. So maybe you can address that on your show someday. I'd like for you to address that.
I've already addressed it because it explicitly supports my position. Like all of the references you both gave support my position.
It eliminates every single naturalistic excuse you can bring up. It eliminates it.
Wrong.
Let's give Tom a chance.
So again, it eliminates some very specific interpretations. Does it eliminate all of them? No. It, by definition, can't. You just don't understand science. It's just the problem.
You can't. Oh God, I've had it. I'm done.
It's literally impossible to falsify every possible alternative because there's literally infinitely many of them, and those are only given the current known naturalistic combinations of things, which
science is your God, Tom.
So there's lots of unknown things that are parts of the brain which everyone accepts, and so saying that there's going to be no possible natural explanation of this is your argument from ignorance. So just like you can say it can be explained by the supernatural, I can say it can be explained by the unknown natural, and both of those are equally supported. We can both make stuff up. It's easy.
Okay.
Let's make it unfalsifiable. You just made it unfalsifiable. Did you just know that? That's a fallacy to make something unfalsifiable.
Yes, I did. I'm using your own methodology and changing it from supernatural to unknown natural. Congratulations, you just showed why your argument is false.
No, we eliminated your naturalistic explanations.
You can't ever do that. That's just by definition, that's not possible. So again, I'm just using your own bullshit methodology and showing why it doesn't work.
No, that's what we did to you. Sounds like projection. It's all good though.
Well, with that, it seems like this may be a good time to go to the Q&A. This has been an interesting one. We hope Jim Majors is okay. I still haven't heard from him, but once in a while, I don't know if he goes on a hike in the woods. He loves the wilderness. I don't know, and he just loses track of time. But we love you, Jimmy. Hope you're doing all right.
I respond to Alex real quick because there's something in the beginning that he was talking about. Yes, there's a lot of these counts that seem to be non-Christian, but my response to that is maybe their interpretation of it. It could have been Christian, but they interpreted in their lens. And maybe they misinterpreted. So that's how I would respond to that.
I suppose, again, I'd point you to Dr. Gregory Shushan, who's, when you get into those kind of questions in any field, cross-cultural work is the rock solid foundation on that, right? Because we have a culture that is a Christian-dominated culture. So what happens when you go to Polynesia and read accounts from 800 years ago where Christianity wasn't introduced in some island? Now you're really in some space where you could kind of say, okay, is Jesus popping up there, or you can go to Native American culture and say that it's before colonialization and say, is Jesus popping up there? So that kind of cross-cultural stuff is one of the best ways to kind of answer that question. Dr. Gregory Shushan, I have an interview with him. It was a great interview. He's really a bright guy, and I think he'd surprise. He's not like a hardcore near-death experience guy. He's very much kind of in the middle. People might enjoy that. If you're a Christian, you're interested in that.
Yeah, I think
the larger question, the more interesting question for me, the skeptical question for me, is Jesus is showing up, right?
A lot,
So what does that mean? So we have all these variety of different experiences, and Buddha's showing up here, and Jesus is showing up here. So once we get past this kind of silliness that we're in here, where we have to be confined, it's this phenomenon of the brain thing. Once we accept, which we're on the verge of kind of moving in that direction. Even you see like Sam Harris, who I think is somewhat of a nitwit, but is being forced to move in that direction. All these guys, even Shermer is being forced to be more open to that. I just interviewed him again. Once we move into this extended consciousness realm, and say, okay, something does seem to be happening there. Now all these questions, these interesting questions pop up about what is the nature of that extended realm? What is the nature of Jesus as it shows up? What is the nature of all these things as they show up? And it's going to be a fun and exciting thing for Christians who are open enough to say, okay, I'm willing to maybe try and really look at the data and reimagine what my tradition, might be interacting with this. Like, I'll just give you a hint of one more thought. I know I'm monopolizing this, but if you take the tulpa idea in Buddhism, and the tulpa idea is that we are co-creators of reality, which is an idea, I just interviewed Dr. Donald Hoffman from Cal Irvine, brilliant physicist. He's been on Sam Harris's show. He's been on Michael Shermer's show. He's got a TED Talk with 3 million views on it. He's like a very hot guy in consciousness, very, very smart. And so when you talk to people like that, I kind of even forgot what I was going to say there about Don Hoffman, but all this is moving past the idea of strict materialism. He is questioning reality, fundamentally. Space-time is doomed is the thing that he likes to quote. That's what the CERN people are saying. The CERN, the atoms people, they're saying, hey, space-time is doomed. We're going to have to go back to what quantum physicists were saying 100 years ago, which is what you were saying, Praise, which is consciousness is fundamental. So there's a whole new thing that's opening up there that's going to be interesting to explore, but it's so far past this debate that you can't get there from here.
Exactly. I'm going to check out your show. It looks pretty awesome.
So your argument against Christianity was that there are lots of near-death experiences and only the ones in Christian societies have Jesus, therefore it's not indicative of Christianity?
Well, that's not strictly true, but it's Jesus doesn't show up all the times you'd expect him to show up.
Yeah, I mean, it could be God the Father too. So he's the great spirit, the light, and then to me, that's mostly the accounts. What I hear, they've seen a great light. It's bright light, and it's a loving force, and that's what I would say, God the Father. But I'm gonna check out your channel, though, man. It looks pretty awesome.
Well, thanks, Praise. Come on over.
Sweet.
Tom, are you convinced yet?
Well, no, but the last thing I wanted to comment on was the quantum physics stuff. Yes, space-time is emergent. It has nothing to do with consciousness. Again, the consensus in every one of those fields, neuroscience, cognitive sciences, physics, astrophysics, cosmology, quantum mechanics, every single one of them is materialism, physicalism. There is no move to dualism or idealism. It's like a 2% to single digits in any field at all, and the biggest ones. It's not really taken seriously academically because it does nothing.
Citation, please.
I can give you the physics one where it says it's 2%, or I can give you the philosophy one that says it's 6%. I can give you the neuroscience one, the quote I just gave from the neuroscience in the field that says the vast majority are physicalist, materialists, and no one in his he knows of none in his general academic field that actually are serious.
There is no such thing as physicalism. That's been debunked by by Anton Zeilinger in 2007. You know that.
No. He's irrelevant to actually people who take physicalism seriously. Like,
no, it's not irrelevant. He won an award for it. Are you serious, dude? I mean, that is ridiculous.
No, you don't get to define other people's positions, so no.
We will let Tom have the last word before we go to Q&A. And with that, want to say thanks for your questions, folks. It's been a wild one, full of surprises tonight. For the super chat, Stupid Whore Energy, as she calls herself, thanks for your super chat. She said, Praise, how do you scientifically verify that two relatives never met? The kind of claim, hold on one second. She said, that kind of claim doesn't belong in a paper.
Yes, it does. That's how they distinguish between what's real, and how these MDs and how they distinguish between what's a real near-death experience and something that was conjured up in their mind.
Well, Praise, if I can jump in there, I think
go ahead.
What she's referring to, and she's just not thinking. I mean, if I have a son that's born after my father dies, then they're relatives, but they've never met.
Yeah.
So my son would never have met his grandfather, but would be related to his grandfather, and that's what Grayson's referring to.
Gotcha. Next up, thanks so much for your super chat from Sigifredo Sarabia. Good to see you back. They said, TJump, does it follow there is no God, that there is no afterlife, or I think they're saying that if there's no God, that therefore there's no afterlife, or can they be independent of each other?
Sure, they can be independent. There's lots of theories of afterlives that have nothing to do with the God, like the Buddhist one that Alex mentioned.
Gotcha. Sigifredo Sarabi, thanks for your other super chat. They said, what happens to those that don't want an afterlife? Is there something wrong with having nirvana or a nihilism for atheists? Can there be afterlife still?
I mean, yeah, atheists could also have afterlives. Like, we could all be in the Matrix, and if we die, we just wake up in a little pod like Neo. So there's definitely could be atheist afterlives. There's no problem with that.
That's a really interesting way of thinking about it. I never thought about that. Next up, thanks for your super chat from Converse Contender. Glad to see you. He's been a help to the show. We've appreciated it. He says, thanks for another interesting discussion, MDD. Well, thank the debaters, because all credit to them. It's been a really interesting one tonight. And one more reminder that their links are in the description if you'd like to learn more. Also, thank you, Praise. The next one, we just had a super chat come in from Subtracted. Thanks for your super chat. They said, hey, Praise, why aren't people who have never heard about Jesus and Christianity in isolated or random countries having near-death experiences about seeing heaven or hell?
Oh, yeah, I mean, that's a good point, but maybe if he can point to me where, I don't think that's true, actually. I don't know if he can show me some type of citation or link to that, I'd like to look that up. I'm not sure, actually. That's a good question.
Well, actually, back to the Gregory Shushan, I mean, they kind of do. I mean, the data that comes back, although it's not supportive of strict Christian dogma, it is generally conforms to the narrative that we've heard about near-death experiences. And some people do go to a negative place, and some people do go to a positive place. So that seems to be where the data takes it.
Thank you, Alex. That's awesome.
Got it. Very interesting. Thanks for your super chat from from Stupid Whore Energy. She says, I think she's responding to how Praise responded to her last super chat. She says, still a claim you can't verify that they didn't know about the relative. Maybe they did.
No, I don't think so. I mean, it had to be some type of subconscious thing or something, but I think that was even eliminated through these MDs. So, for instance, there was an account where I think it was a woman and his like third generation back uncle or something, that his uncle talked to him and they met him. And so how would he know 3 generations back about an uncle? I mean, how would she know about that? To me, even subconsciously, I don't think that would work out.
Gotcha. Thank you very much. By the way, I try to bump these to the top because I always think they're juicy. Nathan Thompson wants to offer a challenge to either Skeptiko or Praise on the shape of the Earth. So just so you guys know, if you guys would be interested, that would be a one-on-one with Nathan Thompson, a fairly famous flat earther. So what do you guys
I take the pear-shaped shape of the world that Neil deGrasse upholds to.
Gotcha. Thank you very much. I have no idea what you're talking about, but thanks for your your question, Catholic traditionalist. They said, question to TJump: is there no actual consciousness? Then, or if there's no actual consciousness, then should murder no longer be illegal since nobody was ever actually alive in the first place?
Well, it's Neil deGrasse Tyson's is an oblate spheroid, so he's right, it's a pear shape. But consciousness, if it's an emergent property, doesn't make it any less valuable as an emergent property. Like, waves still exist even though there's water. The fact that the wave isn't an independent thing doesn't make it any more or less valuable. So it would still be equally as much a crime if it's an emergent property as if it's a fundamental thing in and of itself.
Gotcha. Sahih Luke, thanks for your question. They said, for TJump, how do you explain for people who experienced near-death experiences being able to describe in great detail things, people, and locations that they never visited or met?
You remember stuff people say, people like you see on TV or people hear, and so you may not remember having directly experienced it, but you could still have memories of it that you just aren't aware of. It happens all the time.
Gotcha. Okay. Next up, Super Chat just flew in from Sarah, Stupid Whore Energy. She says, my uncle 3 generations back is named Ramon. Ramon Negrin. I never met him.
Yeah, but she knows about him, so these people never knew about him, and they've even admitted that. So I guess you're gonna have to put them on a lie detector test then and see if they're really telling the truth. Why would someone make that up just out of the blue? It makes no sense.
Gotcha. Next question, Nico Blast. Thanks for your question. They said, if a consciousness exists apart from the brain, why do we have non-REM sleep? Why is consciousness affected by physical chemicals?
Who for me?
I think so.
Well, there's clearly a very tight association between the brain and consciousness, right? So no one's saying that there isn't, if you get hit on the head, it'll affect your consciousness, or you drink too much, smoke too much, do the wrong thing, so yeah, there's an association there. Correlation, not causation.
Gotcha. Thank you very much. And Nico Blast, thanks for your question. They said, if a consciousness exists apart from the brain, why do we have... Oh, got that one already. That's embarrassing. Destroying Angel, thanks for your question. They said, that's not actually for any of the speakers. Anamorphic Mind, thanks for your question. They said, that's not even... You guys are like totally trolling me. You guys are talking to Nathan Thompson. Trevor Lunn, they said, this is for any of these guys. All 3 of you, is there any near-death experience reports from brains that were not reactivated?
That's a good question. Well, I mean, these doctors have pronounced them brain dead, so whatever you take that as,
Gotcha. With that, I think we've run out of questions. So if I have missed anyone's question, forgive me. And want to let you know one last time, the speakers have their links in the description. We are very excited to have them here. Thanks so much, Tom, Skeptiko, and Praise for being here tonight.
Thanks, guys.
It's been a while.
Thank you, man.
Our pleasure. And thanks for your questions, everybody. We hope you keep sifting out the reasonable from the unreasonable. Take care, everybody.